Hello, everyone, and good morning. This is Pam Esquire, also known as your law intellect. I hope everyone is having a fantastic morning so far. Of course, it's early here on the West Coast, but we know that it's what, 10 o'clock on the East Coast. I hope you guys can join me, and welcome to everyone that catches the replay. So, I have been unable to go live, especially with the Bishop Whitehead situation. I've been unable to go live so that I could recap on my last 2 days at trial. Today will be the last day. We surmise Tory Lanez has slept overnight, so he will determine whether he is going to testify. As we all know, he has the right to remain silent. It's not his burden of proof, it's the burden of proof of the prosecutor. So what we anticipate today is to find out if Tory Lanez is going to testify. And then we also have the witness that may show up that the prosecution has been trying to get in touch with. But nevertheless, it's almost predicted that the closing argument will occur today. Good morning to everyone, Tracy. Good morning, Jeff, Tasha, Jess here. Excuse me. Gloria, good morning. The Shay Show. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. So I'm going to get right into it because I have a lot of content because I haven't been reporting on the trial for the last couple of days. So many of you will probably catch the replay, but I wanted to make sure that you guys have more of a timeline of how the witnesses were presented. I know a lot of reporters are just presenting kind of the snippets of the bombshells or the parts that seemed exciting, but obviously there was more to this case. Good morning, Estella. Good morning, Tanya. Good morning, Denise. If you guys have not done so already, please subscribe. Hit that like button. It costs you nothing. Costs you absolutely nothing. We're trying to get in this good algorithm so that people can get our fair and unbiased content. But we try to be fair and unbiased anyway. Some people still think that I'm not, but it's okay. It's fine. I'm like people. I have no dog in a hunt. I don't really care. I just honestly wanted to see some good lawyering. I do that every now and then. And it just so happened to be this trial, and everyone is quite invested in this trial. But I'm sure this trial has not happened the way people thought it was. So, anyway, on Monday, which would have been day 6, the first witness was Officer Sandra Cabral. Sandra Cabral is an officer who, when Tory, Meg the Stallion, Kelsey, which is Meg's friend, and the driver, Quan, were pulled over by the police. It was a big old scene where they got pulled over with a bunch of police officers and helicopters overhead. So Sandra Cabal was actually the person that was assigned to put the handcuffs on Kelsey. So she essentially testified that, they showed the body cam. You know how all of them supposed to have body cams on. So they showed the body cam and they kind of showed where I didn't like the way the scene was, to be honest. They made all 4 of them get out of the vehicle. Meg was shot, so she bleeding all over the place. And they made them basically get on the ground. All of them had to get on the ground, regardless whether you were injured or not. Kelsey was on the ground, so Officer Cabral, again, was responsible for her. She had on, they just left Kylie Jenner's home, so she had, maybe a covering for her bathing suit on. And so you could kind of see stuff we really ain't want to see on the video. But nevertheless, it showed her being handcuffed, Kelsey, by Officer Cabral. She put the handcuffs on. The video shows her helping her get up. She had blood dripping on her chin. She had some blood that was on her leg. And they all of the occupants had to face an apartment building, and they all had separate officers that were assigned to them that did the actual arrest. Well, not the arrest, but the handcuffs, the pat down, and getting their information. So pretty much the prosecution brought them on so we can see the body cam. That was really her purpose. And the defense did their cross examination. Well, let me back up. The prosecution asked the officer on the body cam, did she hear Kelsey ask Meg, was she okay? So I guess that was important to kind of show there wasn't any beefing. Thank you so much for the cash apps. Y'all cash apps coming in. I appreciate it. But so it was to show, I guess, that there was no fighting, no type of beefing, give that type of picture. Because Kelsey said, Meg, are you okay? The officer said, yeah, I heard that. Then you go on to the defense cross. The defense basically questions the witness. Well, did you hear Tory ask, Tory asked, was Meg okay? So apparently Tory must have said, hey, Meg, everything's going to be okay. And the officer didn't hear nothing. Every time the officers only hear it on one side, there's an insinuation that's kind of out there like, oh, so y'all paid attention to what they had to say, but not my client, like it was some type of bias. And that's pretty much all she testified. She didn't testify to that much. Then we had Jody Little. She works for the DA office. She was the second witness on Monday. And she had actually testified prior to, because she's the one that was there when Kelsey gave that statement, recorded statement that they played back in September, when she gave all these details that was the total opposite of what she testified to. This is supposed to be why she pled the fifth, because she says she lied in that interview. But anyway, Detective Little came on so that she can basically verify. Really, I'm still uncertain, maybe it's some court rule here, how she was able to give the foundation for the song that Kelsey Harris. She did a diss track against Meg Thee Stallion when they were beefing, and the name of the song was "Bussin' Back." Y'all got to go check out them lyrics, because I had never even heard it. When I tell you I was fresh to this case, I didn't know none of this stuff. It's called Bustin' Back. And so in that song, Kelsey said she didn't shoot Meg. So that was their point of kind of getting her on there, do the foundation of what the lyrics was. Then on cross-examination, there was some mention in the song about someone named Dez. So the defense said, well, do you know who Dez is? And the Little was like, no, I don't know who that person is. And so then the prosecution said, the defense said, well, what about the line? Did you see the line about, said the lyric stating that the reason why Meg and Kelsey were fighting was because Meg was sucking, y'all know, behind her back. So those were part of the lyrics that Kelsey had in that song, that was why her and Meg was beefing, was basically all over some pain. And Miss Little, she was so cute. She was like, I'm sorry, I didn't hear that because I didn't commit the words to the memory. But if you want to refresh my recollection, that's fine. She's like, no, I don't remember that line. So yeah. And then there were also lines in there where there was mention of Meg lying to the DA. But again, Kelsey was more referring to that allegedly Meg told the DA that Kelsey took hush money. So that's what that line was about. So they're going back and forth on, didn't she say she lied in there, and she lied to Meg, lied to the DA? So they're trying to establish that Meg is basically a liar. So yeah. Then the bombshell on Monday though was Eric. I don't want to say his. Everybody knows him as EJ. He's a stylist to a lot of the stars. Okay. So he was Meg's stylist, and he was there. He's the one that brought Meg to Kylie's home for this gathering. Okay. So I'm going to tell you line by line what EJ basically said. So the defense called EJ, not the prosecution. The defense called EJ. And so EJ said he's never made a statement in this case. No one has ever tried to talk to him. Nobody has ever tried to see what happened. Now, we all know EJ was a part of this, but apparently nobody from the prosecution or the DA's office tried to get this person's statement. This is what I'm talking about the sloppiness that it felt like happened in this case, how they had it in their mind, kind of who they wanted the suspect to be. And I'm sure it was based on Meg saying who shot her, but you still talk to everybody. Like, when did you just stop talking to people because somebody said one thing? It don't make sense. Good morning, Brilly B. Yes. So the defense established that quite well, that nobody even tried to get this person's statement, but he was subpoenaed to be there by the defense. So he talks about the night of the incident. He said they went to Kylie's house. EJ took Meg and Kelsey over to Kylie Jenner's. When they arrived, there was Corey there. Corey is Kris Jenner's boyfriend. I was like, that's interesting. Kylie was there, and Kylie's security and some of Kylie's friends when they arrived. And EJ did describe himself as Meg's stylist and Meg's friend. And so what the defense attorney did was try to establish that typically Meg has security. So there was a question of, well, what does Meg do when she doesn't have security? So what he was trying to establish was Meg may carry some type of weapon or carry something, right? So EJ wasn't committing to a gun or anything. He just said she has tasers and she's used mace, and that's how they protect themselves. And so apparently when questioning further, so let me back up. Before EJ took the stand, remind you, nobody never talked to him before. So in the afternoon when we were about to start, we were supposed to start at 1:20. We didn't start till 2:30. And the reasoning was EJ was up on the DA's floor and everybody was getting his statement for the first time. Maybe the defense may have talked to him before, but clearly, like, the DA was just not. So they were trying to see what his testimony was. So basically, they was all preparing for their cross-examinations in direct. It sounds like on that day while we were waiting in the courtroom for them to come down. So apparently, during this statement that was given, the defense insinuated that they elicited testimony that at some point he's seen objects in Meg's belongings that could look like a gun. But again, EJ did not commit to that at all. As he went on with the testimony, he was just kind of like, it could have been, but it could have been a taser that looked like a gun. So that's what the defense was trying to, because that's their whole theory, is that Kelsey is the one that did the shooting. So there was a lot of questioning about looking through Meg's bag. EJ said, no, I didn't go through Meg's bag. I don't go through searching for firearms. I am not like her security going through the metal detector. I have not looked through her bag for firearms and said that I haven't seen any. So blah, blah, blah. So anyway, they get to Kylie's house. Meg says, I'm about to cook some tacos, y'all. So Meg goes in there and cooks tacos. Kylie and Kelsey start playing beer pong, and the other guests start playing games. So Meg comes out and said, it sounds like you guys are having fun without me. I want to join. So she stops cooking. They say they never get the tacos. She starts coming out with Kelsey. With Kelsey and Kylie. They all start drinking. Eventually, they get into the pool. They all in the pool. Kylie and Meg in the pool. Everybody's drinking. Kelsey gets on a little floater device, right? So EJ is sitting at the bar. So Kylie got a bar. So he's sitting at the bar. He doesn't drink, though. So he notices that Kelsey looked like she on the float and she done passed out on the float. So he gets concerned about Kelsey. And so he gets her and makes her go upstairs to one of Kylie's room to lay down. So Kelsey basically is passed out. She goes to sleep for a few hours. During this time, Meg FaceTimed Tory to come over to Kylie's house. So it took maybe about 30 minutes for Tory to get over to Kylie's house. Anyway, Meg and Kylie, they all in the pool. They having a good time. Everybody drinking. Sound like a whole lot of drinking because they said 6 to 7 bottles. By this time, you had like Odell Beckham there. You had a couple of other people that were there. But by the time EJ came down from taking care of Kelsey, he said that the party, people started leaving. So they started it was winding down. They said Corey left. Corey asked, and then he kind of said, EJ basically said like he don't like being the last black person in somebody's house. course, everybody was laughing. He was like, I don't like being a black person. I was about ready to go. So, anyways, Kelsey comes down. I guess she's drinking some more. So then EJ notices that Meg's wig was coming off. So you said, see, she should have finished them tacos. I know it would have soaked up some of that liquor, right? That's what I was thinking. I was like, man, y'all should have ate. Y'all doing all this on an empty stomach? Because they said like 6 to 7 bottles. So then EJ, EJ go taps Meg on the shoulder and was like, hey, homegirl, your wig is kind of slipping. You might want to fix that. So she tries to fix her wig, and then Meg goes back into the pool. So then by the time Meg comes back from coming like swimming, she comes back to the edge. EJ said the girl's wig was in the middle of her head. And he like, So then he ends up going over to take Meg to the bathroom so that he can try to fix her hair. And then I guess they realize, honey, your hair can't be fixed. So I think it's time for us to go. So Meg, he wanted to go, but Meg was like, she wanted to go, but she only wanted to go with Tory. She didn't want to go without Tory. EJ said he was ready to go with or without Tory. So he's basically saying it's time to go. So EJ goes upstairs, packs all their belongings. So apparently he only deals with Meg because Kelsey is the assistant. So of course, their clothes and stuff were out. So Kelsey, she usually does her own stuff because she's Meg's assistant. But because all of their clothes were out, they had some options because I guess they were going somewhere after this party. So apparently EJ packed all the clothes and put them in the bag. He brought them downstairs, said, tell Meg it's time to go. EJ offered to take him home, and Meg was like, no, Tori's going to take me home. And this is probably where all the chaos started. No, Tori's going to take me home. So EJ was like, are you sure? So EJ got kind of pissed off because he said he knows Meg has been saying that EJ left her there. And EJ was like, I'm very protective over Meg. I'm very protective. You know, she's a good friend. I'm her stylist. And that irritates me that she would even tell people that I left her there, because I didn't. I offered her to, take her home. But she wanted to go with Tori. So EJ says he takes the bags and he goes take it. Tori's driver is outside. He never comes in. His name is Quan. So Tori's driver is in the car. And while he's in the car, he said he puts the bags in the trunk. So it's a purse, there's a Louis Vuitton bag, and there's a suitcase, and all of these go in the trunk of the car. Yes, Cupcake, they should have went with EJ. So then Meg comes out, Kelsey comes out, Tory does not ride with them. EJ goes to the right, Quan and them go to the left. And so that's really all EJ knows. So EJ, they start asking him questions about, did he see any type of items in the bags when he packed them? That type of stuff is what the defense was asking, trying to establish that it could have been something that was in the bags that was used during this shooting. EJ like, nah, I wasn't paying attention. I'm just doing my job, minding my business. And so, of course, they asked EJ, do you want to be here like everybody else? And he was like, no, not really. Like, I mean, I got subpoenaed, so I'm here. So, yeah. So that's pretty much what EJ knew. But what was crazy was there were a few, like Kelsey said, EJ said that Kylie was excited for Tory to come to the house. So they didn't elicit anything about the alleged flirting between Kylie and Tory, but he did say Kylie seemed very excited that Tory was coming to the house and that Tory was there. He mentioned Meg's demeanor. He basically said Meg was wasted. He said she was faded, was the word he used. And he said Meg has different levels to it. And she was at a point where he knew she was faded because she started making some sly remarks. So she said stuff like, she said something to Kylie of the effect of, no, I think it was Kelsey. Kelsey pretty much said, hold on, let me get it specifically. Meg basically said, no, Kelsey told Kylie, you're a vibe. You're actually very fun. And I guess Meg responded and said, well, I'm glad because I thought you were lame or something like that. And Kylie laughed it off. But EJ took it like, oh, I know Meg. And she starting to say some slick stuff. So that's another reason why we need to get up out of here, because he knew Kylie longer than he knew Meg. And so, yeah, and he said Meg was barefoot when they left the house. So there may be the whole slipper thing, going back to the slipper may have happened. But again, EJ really didn't know because he left. So, yeah. So that's that. That's pretty much a summary of Monday, which would have been day 6. So day 7, that's when the bombshells came. There was bombshells all over the place. So you gotta hold your wigs and your seats for this one. So in day 7, Sean Kelly testified. If you guys recall, he is the person who owned the house where the incident happened behind the house. So he resides in Nichols Canyon. So he testified that he was asleep at his home on the date of the incident, that the back of the house, there was a picture they showed with a large kind of cement driveway. And what Sean Kelly said was that people all the time go behind in that area because it's good cell phone reception. So because there's good cell phone reception, he gets disturbed a lot. His bedroom windows are literally in the back of the house. So it's like 2 windows right next to each other where his bedroom is. And then if you this is on the upper level. Then if you move a little bit over to the left, there's a balcony. Then on the other side of the balcony was his son's room. So he said he hears this commotion and he looks and sees 2 girls arguing. So he was going to open up the window to tell them, yo, cut it out, because he said he gets disturbed a lot. And he sees 2 girls fighting. He said they were fighting violently. They were pulling hair. They was really hurting each other. Like it was a straight up fight, which is a problem because Meg testified they never physically fought. Kelsey testified they never physically fought, but then when the defense probed her and questioned her, she did mention when they got out the car that they could have bumped each other. So he sees all this fighting. Then he says the third guy jumps out of the vehicle and he violently tries to separate the 2. So that goes on for a minute. And then he says the fourth guy, he kept calling him the smaller guy or the short guy. Because, he don't know none of these people. So he was like the short guy or the smaller guy came out of the car. Now, the issue that was going back and forth like tennis is the timeline to when Tory actually got out of the car. Okay, that's what the issue is. That's probably what the issue is all over the internet too still. Because it went back and forth. So apparently when the defense first interviewed him, he said that Tory was still in the car when he stepped out on the balcony and he saw a muzzle flash. He said the muzzle flash occurred between the 2 girls. So we're all insinuating, of course. He said he thought it was fireworks. He heard the noise too. So he said he thought it was fireworks. So the issue between the defense and the prosecution was the timeline to when Tory got out. Because at first, apparently, Sean Kelly said that Tory was still in the car when the first muzzle happened and it was between the girls. So that would almost insinuate that some shots must have happened. And Tory wasn't even out the car yet. Then as the testimony, progressed, he said they all were fighting. They were all out there fighting. I just said the muzzle was closest to the girls, but they were all out there. So then it was the insinuation that all 4 of them was out there. So then I think by the time it ended, they literally were going back and forth trying to get this man to give the timeline on when he saw the muzzle, the first actual muzzle flash when they heard it. And I don't think that was ever really established. The only thing that was kind of established was that we know there was a muzzle flash at some point by the girls. That was what he, thought he perceived. But then this was the bombshell. This was the one that nobody expected. I don't think the defense expected this because, mind you, the defense had their investigator interview Sean Kelly before. The DA interviewed Sean Kelly, I believe, and then one of the officers did. So the defense thought they knew this man's total testimony. Well, the bombshell basically came when Sean Kelly says, I saw the shorter guy and he had about 4 to 5 muzzle flashes by him. That's where everybody was like, wait, what? Yes. He testified, yeah, I saw the first flash closer to the girls, but actually the flash was more looking like it was going into the car or in the car or whatever. He said, but I saw Ford, I heard the shots, which now he knows it's gunshots. He thought it was fireworks. So we know it's gunshots, so I'm going to refer to it as gunshots. But he did say he thought it was fireworks at first and then later learned that obviously it was a gun. He said he saw 4 to 5 muzzle flashes. And then what he did was he demonstrated, he said the flashes were going everywhere. Okay? So he demonstrated with his hand it going everywhere. That's why people are on the internet saying Sean Kelly said that it shot in the air. That was never established. He said it was everywhere and he moved his hands all over the place. Now, again, the prosecutor could have said, let the record reflect that the witness on the stand is pointing his fingers in a gesture like a gun, and it seems to be pointing up more so in the air. If they wanted to establish that was in the air, but that's not what happened. So, like, people that was coming on I did a little clip on Instagram. Y'all can go check it out. Sean Kelly was just the independent witness where everything happened behind his house. The incident occurred behind his house, so he was able to see it. So, yeah, that was the bombshell. So then Sean Kelly just ran. Now he's an older white gentleman. He ain't older like that, but maybe like late 50s, early 60s ish. He don't know these people. He probably never heard of them in their whole life. So that's the thing of he would come across the most credible because he don't even know none of these people. But his testimony was definitely different from Meg. Like, you have to acknowledge that his testimony, she said they never was fighting. It was just a lot of inconsistencies. So that was proven, that she had a lot of inconsistencies. But I think we know that by now that everybody done been lying at some point in this case. And I don't even know if they were so drunk, they don't even know what happened. That's kind of my synopsis at this point. Everyone was pretty much faded and they had no clue what was going on. Nikki B said, if I hear arguing and then loud pops, I will naturally assume shots not fired. Girl, where you from, though? See, I would too, because I'm from Detroit. So I would never think fireworks. Fireworks just became legal. So I'm going to automatically hit the floor. So Sean Kelly said that too. He said he was worried about, and he told them, like, I wasn't paying attention like that because I'm paying attention to my son. Like, he was scared. I had to tell him to come in my room. I was concerned about him because, I didn't want nothing to happen to my child. But what Sean Kelly said was after that. So all this time, nobody stops fighting. He kept on reiterating everybody's fighting. Everybody's in this big old melee. So apparently at some point, Meg gets back in the passenger side and the girl's still trying to fight her. So the girl we're assuming is Kelsey. Meg is still kicking and kicking and kicking and kicking. It was just so much. It was so all over the place on where people were in the car. So I don't want to misquote where these people were in the car. But somehow they all got out and everybody was fighting. So eventually, Meg falls to the ground. She allegedly crawls, according to Sean Kelly, over to the neighbor's house across the street and collapses in the driveway. Sean Kelly said that at that point, the other three people, which would have been Kelsey, Quan, and the little guy, they went over there and started beating up Meg. He said Meg was in a fetal position and they were beating her up. But then he got a little dramatic because he said, I thought that their plans were to beat her up, and basically it looked like they were trying to kill her. And so I thought that they were going to throw her. We have a river not too far from us. So I thought they were going to throw her in the river. We was like, wait, what, sir? You've been watching a lot of movies. Oh, Nikki B said, I'm from Chicago. I'm feeling you. I understand what you're saying. Yeah, he was calling him like the shorter guy, the smaller guy, the little guy. Everybody was just kind of laughing. But yeah, there was a lot of arguing, a lot of fighting. So that was the big testimony yesterday, because it either put, Sean Kelly said, I saw an object in his hand. He never identified a gun because he didn't even think it was gunshots, mind you. He thought it was fireworks. But he did say he saw an object in Tory's hand, the shorter guy. He didn't say his name, but we know who it is. And he said the shorter guy, and we know who it is because the defense attorney kept saying my client. He said the shorter guy, it was muzzled by him, and he kind of was just all over the place. So it looked like at some point he had something in his hand that resembled a gun, and that was being fired. Yes, Tory is really, really short. You Daniel says, so the rumor of being jumped is true. That's what came out in the testimony. I don't think it was expected, like I said. I think we all were shocked, like, wait, what happened? And so the prosecutor brought out like gunshot audio of gunshots and said, is this kind of what you heard? And it was like boom, boom, boom. And he was like, yes, that's the sound that I heard. So they like played audio, of the gunshots. And then you have Sean Kelly's son allegedly found one of the cartridges in the yard the next day. But then you had testimony where Sean Kelly acknowledged he didn't know if a girl was shooting or not. That's why I'm saying where the discrepancies come in at, because he said the muzzle flash was closer to them, but he doesn't know if they were shooting. But on the other side, when it came to Tory, he did say he seen object in his hand, and it was outstretched. So that's kind of the conflicting testimony on how much weight you give, But it just seems a little odd, like how y'all switching guns. It was only one gun found. Like, how was it over here, then it was over here? That's why it led me to believe that Tory was already out of the car. So what defense was trying to establish, they were trying to establish that Tory, it was a gunshot. This is what their theory is. There was a gunshot. It was over between the girls. So, of course, it was Kelsey, according to them. Tory comes out as if he going to be the captain, save him. And he goes and they struggling with the gun because he's trying to get the gun back, which would explain the gun residue on his hand. And he didn't have nothing to do with it. He just came out so that he could. Yeah, that's what, who just said that? Sounds like Kelsey had the gun first. Tory grabbed it from her and emptied the clip in the air. Could be a theory. I think that's what the defense is trying to establish, just what you said. Steph said, I think Mr. Kelly's a little dramatic. He's a lot dramatic. But he didn't have a reason to lie. So how do you see? This is the conundrum that you have. If you want your jury to believe Mr. Kelly, we can't make them believe part of the testimony, right? But the other part of the testimony is it is damning to Tory. And then you also have these people that allegedly were aggressive. And Mr. Kelly was very clear. He felt like Tory, everybody was arguing, so they were yelling. But he felt like Tory was just agitated. He was the most aggressive out of everybody. He was the meanest. Like he kept saying that. He was like, "Yeah, they all were yelling, but your client just happened to be the loudest." That's what he was saying. So that went back and forth again. The timeline was important because we don't know if Tory was outside of the vehicle when the first muzzle flash was seen and the shot was heard, or if he was in the vehicle or outside. Because if he was in the vehicle, then if it's after the fact, then you go with the theory he got out, ran out, tried to take the gun, and was trying to struggle with the gun or whatever. But if he was outside the vehicle, then obviously all the shots could have came from you because he said Sean Kelly said he wasn't sure. He said they were all grouped together. He just thought the flashes were closer to the girls, but they were all grouped together. So they were all fighting. They were all tussling. Like he wouldn't commit to he came over there and trying to get a gun or something and there was a struggle. Sean Kelly wouldn't commit to that. He said all y'all was acting like a stone cold fool. And he basically said this whole incident was bizarre. I'm like, yep, that's probably a good definition of what happened. It was very, very bizarre. Yeah, I think the driver was trying to separate the two, if I had to guess. And he was a big guy apparently and tall. And I think he probably had to do it in a violent way. Meg ain't no little person. Now Kelsey is kind of short, but she was described as EJ as kind of being a firecracker when she drunk. So you got all these drunk people, and we don't even know. Nobody asked the question do you know if they were drinking? If, did they get tested for anything else? Was there any other like substances in their body? They didn't even ask Sean Kelly. They asked him, was there anything that obstructed his view from seeing this? But they did not ask him, were you drinking? Were you doing drugs? Was there any medication you were on? Do you take Ambien? Do you take anything that would affect your perception or affect your ability to perceive what you're saying that you saw? But I guess in theory, he kind of helped the prosecution, so they didn't want to really block his testimony. And then, in theory, the purpose for the defense was to show that it was muzzles that were by the woman. They don't want to incriminate their client, but I'm sure somebody did a bumper too. Where is Quan the driver? That is the question of the day. Okay. Quan the driver is nowhere to be found. So there was testimony after the fact by um, Officer Stogner. He was the detective, like the lead detective, what we call an officer in charge in Michigan. He was the lead detective. Officer Stogner testified that he tried to contact Quan and couldn't get in touch with Quan. So we ain't never heard from Quan. Was Quan subpoenaed? I don't even think they never even talked to Quan. I don't know how hard they looked either, looking at this investigation, but they never really talked to Quan. So now that we talked about, so then after Sean Kelly finally got done and they was trying to figure out when Tory got out of the car, because that was the big deal. But what the DA tried to establish was that the statement about the muzzle being by the girls didn't happen initially. So like when he talked to the police officer, I guess it wasn't brought up. When Sean Kelly talked to the detective Stogner, it wasn't brought up. They alleged that the first time when he called 911, it wasn't brought up. So they're alleging that he didn't come up with this whole woman thing until after the detective for the defense, not the detective, the investigator for the defense came and talked to Sean Kelly. So that's what the DA was trying to establish. And then they basically, the DA said, and you did a walkthrough first. Like, did you guys go over what the testimony was before it was recorded? Because it was recorded by the defense investigator. But apparently they did what they call a walkthrough, was I want to know what you got to say before I hit this record button. And he said, yeah. But, he later testified there was no variation between before when it was recorded and it wasn't recorded. So yeah, ultimately, Sean Kelly said that client was out of the car at the same time the gun was shot by the time it ended. So they was literally going back and forth with this timeline on was he in the car, was he out of the car, was he in the car, was he out of the car. That was a big thing. Even after break, I'm like, are we really going to take lunch and come back with him? And we already know that y'all just fighting over where he was at in the car. But you also have to look at like his charges, because one of them is possession of an unregistered gun. So putting it in his hand ain't necessarily, the most helpful thing either. So anyway, at 2:00, we had witness number 2 yesterday, which was Officer Ruggiero Diaz. And he basically is the one when Sean Kelly called 911, Diaz was the one that showed up to the house for the call. And Diaz said he interviewed Sean Kelly, and Kelly told him he looked out the window, observed a black Cadillac with rear passenger door that was open. He said 2 females were in a physical altercation. It took him about 15 to 20 minutes to get to the residence after the 911 call. And he said that Sean Kelly never gave him a description of who the shooter was. And the witness admitted that he didn't ask questions about who the shooter was. But see, it was also when he first made the phone call, he mentioned the fighting, because Sean Kelly said at that time that's when they were beating her up. So when he called, he was letting them know that they were beating up the girl. So apparently Officer Ruggiero I'm messing this man's name, Officer Diaz. He basically was the person that came over to the house and talked to him. His testimony was literally 5 minutes. He got on the stand at 2:00 and he was off at about 2:05. So at 2:05, Detective Ryan Stogner came on and he did a follow-up investigation on Sean Kelly. So the defense, now these are the defense bringing these witnesses, just to clarify. Defense brought Stogner, defense brought Diaz, defense brought Sean Kelly, defense brought EJ. And so Detective Stogner did a follow-up investigation on Sean Kelly. And then the defense said, well, was this recorded? And Officer Stogner said no. He said, well, why didn't you record this conversation? He said, because it's a telephone conversation and that's not standard procedure. So he again gave the story that he got from Sean Kelly, that Sean Kelly saw 2 girls fighting. The question was, did you ask who the shooter was? The answer said Sean Kelly said he didn't know who the shooter was, that it was unknown. So then he stated that, but he did state that the other female was nearest to the muzzle flash and that 2 females were fighting. So he did tell Officer Stogner that. He said that he couldn't tell who was holding a weapon at that time. So Sean Kelly did say he did not mention the shorter guy holding gun with 5 shots. So it was established that when Stogner talked to Sean Kelly, there was never a mention of Tory. Like I told you guys, you can tell that this was news to the defense. And one of the reasons is after a while, you can see the frustration in the defense attorney's face. And he asked to treat him as a hostile witness. Dude wasn't even hostile. He was just sitting back with his accent like, yes, I looked out of the window and, he just, he was like, and yeah, he was fabulous, like he just was, he was chilling saying what he allegedly saw. But he was like, can I treat him as a hostile witness? Of course, the court said no, because he wasn't really a hostile witness. He just probably wasn't saying what you thought he was going to say because he added more too. It wasn't like he didn't really take away, but he did add more that nobody knew about it. Scorpio Queen said too many stories for me and you too. Me too. You and me both, I should say. Why not test her? I agree. That's one of the things. I have an issue. I can't even get to, I think it's up in the air who shot her. If y'all want to know my position right now. But my biggest issue is the LAPD. Y'all just, what y'all just took somebody, you supposed to believe a victim, but you also investigate. You had the ability to investigate, swab for DNA, and do all of that stuff, and y'all didn't do it. And now we got all these holes all over the place, and we more confused than other. Like literally, Sean Kelly's testimony doesn't match nobody's, and he's supposed to be the independent witness. Well, everyone knows the LAPD has been shady since at least Rodney King. Yes, and we all know what happened with Death Row at LAPD. That's why we don't know who killed Tupac. But anyway, I digress. So Detective Stogner is being examined by um, the defense attorney, and they're talking about Sean Kelly. So again, he says both males returned to the vehicle and one female went into the vehicle. It was all over the place on who was in the vehicle at what time. So I don't even want to try to act like I can even unpack that because it was all over the place how they were explaining it. Plus, he had, like I said, a cute little accent, and it was like sometimes it was like, "Excuse me, say that again. What you say?" So it was kind of a couple of those moments. But he said, according to the statement, one female was next to the muzzle flash, so that came up again. Defendant established that Sean Kelly was certain that one muzzle flashed by the female. The interview with the witness had with Meg, now that Stogner had with Meg, it included her attorney was on the phone and Meg's production manager who was on the phone. So the defense attorney asked Stogner, "Did you ever ask Miss Pete if she was intoxicated?" So he responded, "She mentioned coming from a party and that they were drinking." So then the defendant said, "But did you ask her, was she intoxicated?" He basically said no. And then he said, "When you asked to talk to Meg, did she ever say there was never an argument?" And Stogner said, "Yes, Megan did say that there wasn't an argument." So then Stogner stated that Meg said her problems were with Tory and it was not with Kelsey. So that's kind of like why they were focused on Tory, I assume. And so then the defense attorney established that based on what Meg's testimony was, she said that there was not a fight between her and Kelsey. So again, the defense attorney is methodically trying to lay out that Meg is a liar and that she was lying to them. So now that whole "if you lied before, you're gonna lie again," I'm sure that's gonna come out in closing statements. Um, the defense attorney asked, "Did Meg tell you that in the first interview that his client offered her $1 million?" Remember, there was stories that Tory asked or offered to give Meg and Kelsey $1 million, basically to shut the heck up. Meg did 2 interviews. So in the first interview, she never mentioned $1 million, and that was supposed to be in 2020. But apparently in the second interview she did in 21, she mentioned about the bribes and $1 million or whatever. So then the defense attorney asked Stogner, "Did Meg state that his client said, 'Please don't say anything,' because he was on probation?" And the answer was yes. So then the question from the defense attorney to Stogner was, "Did you check to see if my client was on probation?" Stogner said yes. "Why, yes, I did check." Well, Detective Stogner, what did you find out when you looked to see if my client was on probation? Oh, I found out that he was not on probation. So again, that looks like Meg was lying by saying that Tory said he wasn't on probation. So what was really going on is apparently in 2017, Tory did catch a case in Broward County in Florida, and he got what's called a diversion program. Now, our diversion programs in Michigan is kind of like we'll give you certain criteria that you need to meet. It's similar to probation, but it's not called probation. So it'd be like you got to go to anger management. Like, say it's a domestic violence first time. You got to go to anger management. You got to go to family counseling if kids were around. You have to pay a fee, do community service, and once you finish all of this, then we dismiss your case. That's what diversion is. I don't know what his criteria was in diversion, but it looks like he was only on the diversion program for like 2 months before the case was dismissed. So that was back in 2017. So it was this big hoopla about diversion versus probation and that she must have been lying. But apparently, according to the prosecutor, Tory at one point mentioned being on probation on social media. A lot of their evidence has come from social media. This be a warning to everyone. We've been using a murder case I did 10 years ago. We use social media. We've been able to use social media for a long time, and it's even more advanced now. 10 years ago, it wasn't even where it is today. So they're always going to look at what you say. They're going to try. They have private investigators that canvass your social media. They're going to go to your LinkedIn, your Instagram, your Facebook. They have a whole list, and they go and they try to canvass. They get your usernames, and if applicable, they might try to subpoena your joint, so you can't even delete nothing. Yeah, she was shot. We just don't know who did it. Or you know what? I'm not gonna say we don't know who. I'm gonna say that it has not been definitively established. I guess who did it, in my opinion. The jury might think something different. They might think they got enough information, but I just think the LAPD dropped because we'll get into the DNA in a few minutes. I told you this was gonna be a little lengthy because it was for 2 days. So let's see what else Stogner said. We talked about the money. We talked about the probation. And so the defense attorney said, did Meg ever state why she told you she lied in the first interview? And Stogner said, yeah, I guess she didn't want to give false information. So, of course, the defense played off of that like, so she said she ain't want to lie on nobody, right? So that's supposed to be why. Plus, she mentioned, so then the defense attorney said, did she mention that it was in the era of George Floyd and she was upset because that's what she testified to, that she was scared about police shootings and all of that. She was scared of the police. She didn't want no contact with the police because of what happened with George Floyd. Stogner said, yeah, she did mention George Floyd. So the defense attorney said, wait a minute. You showed me in your report where you put in there that she said that she was concerned about the George Floyd situation and police shooting. And Stogner was like, no, I didn't put it in the report. I just remember it. I just know it off the dome. That's pretty much what he said. So then I guess Meg was saying the reason why she said she was cut by glass is because she didn't know that it was bullets at first, until she didn't know she had been shot until she felt the pain. Oh, goodness. It was. And so then the defense attorney, remember there was a bus stop. Thank you so much. And thank you so much for the super chat. But then there was a mention that, remember the bus situation? Y'all got to go to my other video. How before all this incident happened, Meg and them are arguing in the car. And then Meg said, get me up out this joint. And Meg jumps out of the car on Sunset Boulevard and she walking in her bikini. You cannot make this stuff up, y'all. She walking in her bikini to the bus stop and Tory got to go convince her to come back to the car. So Stogner was asked, so what about the bus stop? He like, what about the bus stop? He's like, what about the bus stop? He's like, I don't recall anything about a bus stop. So Meg never told you that they stopped before at the bus stop? He's like, no, I don't know what you're talking about, bruh. I don't know anything about a bus stop. So then, of course, remember, allegedly, well, Meg did say that. Meg said that Tory shot her and said, dance, right? So the defense asked Detective Stogner, did she ever tell you about the dance? Was Meg the only person out of all of your interviews that said dance, that my client said that? So Stogner admitted that Meg was the only one that ever made that statement that occurred. So Stogner also said he attempted to talk to Kelsey, and Kelsey refused to talk, just like Quan refused to talk. So these people ain't even talking. So when do y'all just let people say, I ain't gonna talk to y'all at all? I guess they made it where they wasn't a suspect. So Kelsey kind of refused to talk. So then there was testimony that he tried to elicit, and I do that sometimes. Well, I used to do that sometimes when I did defense, where you almost make their witness your witness. So because Stogner has experience, you can ask him certain things where he almost becomes your expert. That's kind of a slick way you can make them your expert. So the defense asked him about, if you guys recall, Megan had fragments. They were defined as fragments in her ankles. So the defense attorney asked about the fragments and said, are you familiar with fragments? He said, yeah, I know, what they are. He said, well, could you explain about how fragments are made? He said, well, he went through the whole, you have the bullet that consists of the casing and the projectile. When the gun is shot, the projectile comes out. He said, but when it hits an object, it basically goes into fragments. So I think they were trying to maybe establish that maybe she wasn't directly shot in the foot. It was some fragment pieces that came in the foot. I heard that before. But I think that one of the issues with that would be that when the doctor that treated Meg came on the stand, he said they treat all bullets as fragments. Like they call them fragments. They don't differentiate between a whole bullet is inside of you, pieces of the bullet is inside of you. So we don't really know what was in her foot according to them. It's just been called fragments because that's what they call them at the hospital. So that's what it's been referred to. So then on cross-examination, which occurred at 2:30 against Stogner, the DA basically, now you have the DA, which is very interesting because this is the OIC or the head detective, but they were called by the defense. So the DA was the one doing cross. So the DA established that Sean Kelly, the interview at first was only 5 minutes and that Stogner didn't take notes. So that's why it wasn't as detailed as the second one, because, we have to explain why, he didn't have much information or whatever. So he said, the witness said, which was Stogner, that this was just a summary. It wasn't detailed. And during that interview, Sean Kelly never said that he saw a female shoot or hold a gun. The witness never asked what the gentleman, what the guy did at all. So Stogner never even asked, well, you said that it was females. What were the males doing? See, this is what I'm talking about the insufficient investigation. Like, you didn't even hardly ask no questions for real. And then the DA established that when Meg was interviewed, she emphatically said that Tory shot her. Meg said that she didn't say anything at first. Part of it was she was scared. She was in shock. But she said she saw Tory point the gun at her and started firing. She said she heard the noise when he first shot. See, this was a big thing too, because social media again, there was a post by Meg where she said her back was turned when the incident happened. So that post went into evidence. So of course the defense is like, how you gonna see my client and you saying your back was turned? Well, what Stogner said is that Meg told him that she was walking away, but when she heard the first shot, she turned her head. So it would almost, you're just doing this to look back. So your back may still be turned, but your head is turned. So that's what Stogner had. So it kind of doesn't necessarily contradict that her back was turned. So Stogner said that was the information he got from her. He did mention again about trying to interview Jaquan, and Jaquan was unresponsive. And I guess in the second interview, that's when Meg mentioned the $1 million being offered and said that the defendant tried to offer $1 million. At these interviews, Meg was calm. Her demeanor was somber. She wasn't upset. But at some point, she was tearing up while she was telling the story. Like it was really, really affecting her and really, really bothering her. So then there was a break. And the defendant comes on. The defense attorney talks about interviewing Meg in 2021. Mentions that Meg didn't say much in the first interview. Then that's when the Instagram post comes up, and Meg, the response from Stogner was, well, she never said her back was turned. I mean, she never said that she couldn't see anything because she said her back was turned, but she turned her head. She never said she turned her whole body. So that came out. So that's pretty much Stogner's testimony in a nutshell. So then we had a rebuttal witness, and this was very important because this was another thing I was arguing with people about. These folks on here try to clickbait, and they don't even care for real about the facts of this case. I don't care like one side or another. I'm more always trying to figure out the defense because that's what I did. I don't think like a prosecutor. Now I anticipate what they're going to argue because I couldn't be a good defense attorney when I was one unless I could anticipate what they're going to argue and try to rebut it. But I lean more towards defense. Like, how can I prove that the DA or the prosecution is wrong? So the rebuttal witness, his name is Randy Zapata, and he's a criminalist of the LA lab. He testified last week. Now, he testified as to the DNA, right? So when the defense expert came on talking about DNA, Zapata stayed in the courtroom. So he didn't necessarily agree with everything that expert said. So that means that he's able to come back as a rebuttal witness to tell the jury what he doesn't agree with of their expert. So, of course, at first, Zapata explains transfer DNA. So he said it's possible that with each contact and transfer, less DNA comes on you. So, for example, if I shake your hand, right? So I shake Philly Witherspoon's hand. His DNA may be on my hand, but I may go shake Just Here's hand, and none of his DNA will come on that hand. You get what I'm saying? So he was saying how to transfer. Sometimes you can touch stuff and leave DNA. Sometimes you can't. So this all goes to the inconclusiveness of the DNA on the weapon. So then this was what I was waiting for because I never understood why the prosecution didn't talk about wiping guns down and all of that. Because if you guys recall, and maybe I didn't complete it, let me go back. So when at the Sean Kelly, in his testimony, Sean Kelly said after Megan was beat up, apparently Quan knew that they called the police. So Quan said, y'all, they done called the police on us. We gotta go. So they basically dragged Meg to the car and put her in the car, did a U-turn and took off. So essentially there was a time frame. You get what I'm saying? Like there was a time frame. It wasn't like the police came, they found everybody at the scene and that was that. No, they had to pull Megan them over. So there was a space. So I never knew why weren't they talking about that you can wipe DNA? And then I had some people, if they wipe DNA, it's not going to be none. No, it can compromise it. Just because you wipe off something doesn't mean it takes away all the DNA, but it can cause confusion in the DNA like it did now where there were 4 contributors. So essentially, this person, this criminologist, Zapata said that it can be, if you wipe it off, you can remove some DNA. He also said if you washed your hands, then you may not transfer DNA. So if I wash my hands, right, and I don't touch anything, I don't touch my face, because that's where you get it. I'm not playing in my hair, nothing that can leave DNA on my hands. I may not have DNA on my hands that can even transfer. That's what he was saying. So then the prosecution said, well, what about if they all came out of a pool? He said that's similar to washing your hands. So if they all went swimming, they would probably be clean, because that's like washing your hands. So you may not have any DNA on you because you just came out of a pool. So they were kind of explaining how DNA isn't what most of us think it is. So what was very important to me, and this is what I argue with people about, because they just want to argue with me. I'm like, I'm just reporting what happened. So nobody's paying me. I'm just trying to, I want to see some good litigation. I like to see trials because I'm a trial attorney. So, anyways, if you guys recall, there were 4 contributors of DNA. Kinda Nene, almost. So for you to know that there are 4 contributors on the DNA, right? This is what we know for the gun. Tory's DNA was not found on the clip, which to me isn't that significant, because if it ain't your gun, you probably ain't loaded no way. But it was 4 contributors on the gun. They can tell because there's a Y chromosome that there was a male. And he was the 90% contributor. The percentage doesn't really matter on who touched it the most or whatever, but that's all they can tell, that there was at least one. It could have been more than that, but they can know it wasn't enough quantity for them to quantify that. So it was at least one. That does not automatically, people just assume that means the rest are female. But if they say at least one, that means there's a possibility it's 2, 3, or 4. So that's what he cleared up, that it could have been 4 males. They just don't know. They don't have enough. And it could be females, but they don't know. So the whole theory of everybody coming out and basically saying, oh, they found female DNA, it could be, but it could also be Tory Lanez, because he wasn't included or excluded. He was totally excluded from the clip. But it wasn't enough to include or exclude him on the gun. So the same way that your people are arguing it was a female DNA, so it could be Kelsey. Okay, well, it was also, he wasn't excluded, so it could be Tory Lanez. So let's just be fair about how we're reporting this. So he cleared it up. What was interesting is apparently they said the defense expert, and I didn't catch it if he said it, the defense expert did say that it has to be a female on there. But I'm not sure if the DA's criminologist, Zapata, heard that, because when the defense attorney got up, he was like, my expert said that? Like, he was confused. Like, he didn't even think the expert said that it had to be a female. He didn't really agree with that. He was like, oh, okay. So he can't seem kind of, taken aback that that's what he said. But I mean, I guess if he said that, that would make sense why people were all over saying that. And I'm like, you can Google that. Like, how transfer, how it occurs, and how, if you can't, you may not be able to match it up to the person, but you may be able to tell that it was male out of clip. It showed that it was at least 2 males on the clip, but they weren't Tory Lanez. So it may or may not have been a female. So then, of course, the defense asked, did you get any samples from Kelsey Harris? Of course, it was no. Well, if you would have got a sample from Kelsey Harris, wouldn't you have been able to eliminate her? Well, yeah, if I would have got a sample. Would you have taken a sample from her? Yeah, if they would have gave it to me. So they kind of just established, what we all know, that they should have took some DNA from everybody that was in there instead of just assuming that it was Tory. And so on recross, what the DA established is, yes, sloppy police work. Thank you so much, Tasha. I appreciate it. And then on recross, the DA basically established that a lawyer can't argue that DNA was not on the gun, because what this man said was, because he couldn't be included or excluded, Tory's DNA can be on the gun. They just don't have enough of his contribution of DNA to be able to tell one way or another. So people that's going out there, his DNA was not on the gun, case closed. Well, that's not necessarily true, according to this expert. He wasn't included, but he wasn't excluded. So that means the lawyer can't go out there and say he was excluded from the gun. He can't say that because that's not true. But that's the same thing for the prosecution. They can't go on and say he somehow included, because he wasn't. It was not determined one way or another. You said 4 contributors of DNA on the gun, 4 individuals in the car, only 1 person tested for DNA, and that person came up inconclusive. Why not test all 4? That's the big question. All of this could have been eliminated if they would have just did some thorough work. Not even thorough, basic police work, right? Because in the state of California, if I am correct, if my research is correct, whenever you come in and you've been, because mind you, Meg went to the hospital, Kelsey, Tory, and the bodyguard, they all went to jail. So they did check for GSR, but why would you just check for GSR when you had them in there and it was a potential felony? When you arrest them and it's a potential felony and you're a suspect, they have the right to take your DNA when it's a felony in the state of California. So why not take? So this is what was baffling me, is the police work. I think they did a shoddy job. I probably would have went a little bit harder on Stogner as the detective, because I think it was pulled out enough of how they got holes in their stories, but that's that. Nene says so much confusion. Hi, thank you so much. All right, y'all. So I got to get ready for this last day, hopefully, because I'm tired. They basically, today we expect to find out if Tory is going to testify. We know that he has the right to remain silent. It's not his burden to prove. It is the prosecution. So he had time to sleep overnight, talk to his family, and decide whether he thinks it's in his best interest to testify. So I want y'all, before we leave, tell me how many in this chat put a 1 if you think that Tory should testify, and put a 2 if you think he should just be quiet. That it's been enough reasonable doubt and he should just be quiet. So we got 2 L's said he should testify. Patricia said, shut your mouth. Jonathan said, shut your mouth. St. James said, shut your mouth. That's what she said, shut your mouth. Okay, so we a little mixed there. I don't think he should testify. But ultimately, it's up to him. Compton girl said, get on the stand. Okay. His ego will make him talk. He will. You know what? If he takes the stand, and you're right, Tasha, if he takes the stand, some doors are going to be open, I'm sure, that he doesn't want to have open. Because part of the motion that the prosecution presented when the jury left, they kind of handle a lot of preliminary matters and motions, where they felt like when the defense attorney started talking about, asking questions to EJ about whether he ever seen Tory with a gun. Does Tory talk about gun? Does Tory, has Megan ever said Tory talked about guns? They felt like, the DA felt like, that the defense opened the door for character as to whether he has a propensity, I guess, to be with guns or not. Because you can't talk about character unless the other person opens the door under the rules. And they said they had rap lyrics. that would show the affiliation with guns. He had a fight with somebody from Love and Hip Hop. They wanted to bring up the August Alsina situation. They wanted to bring up lyrics about what happened in his case that he rapped about. The judge did say that if he gets on the stand, anything that has to do with this case is fair game. So he would be hit. But what was also, it was just so much, y'all. And then I'm gonna leave you with this though. And then one of the things EJ said as well that I forgot to tell you guys was that apparently during quarantine, Meg and Tory spent a lot of time together. That's why the questions came out of, did she ever talk about, did he ever talk about guns around you? Because EJ said he would drop Meg off at Tory's house, or Tory came to his house, or they would go on trips together. They were straight up kicking it. So, like, for her to go on Gayle King and say, no, we didn't have an intimate relationship, is just absurd to me. Literally, EJ said that they were together all the time and he felt safe with her being, like, I guess they're real overprotective of Meg. So him and her manager, they almost kind of monitor everything that she does. So EJ said he ain't like Tory at first, but he said then after a while he was like, oh, he's a good guy, he all right, because of how Meg was with him. But they was kicking it. Like, it wasn't no, because at first I said, oh, maybe she had a one night stands, 2 night stands, whatever. I said, but no, it sounded like they was like, you picked to be with him during quarantine when everybody was, that says a lot. You said she didn't want to claim him. Well, she was doing lives during that time. I don't follow her like that, but when it would come down my timeline, her and Tory, they were saying they making music together, but they would do lives and stuff like that all the time. So it seemed like they did have something going on. To shoot 5 times, you have to grip a gun and shoot how was his DNA inconclusive. But that's what I was saying, is that there was a time in between where they left the scene and they went into the vehicle. That's why I didn't understand why the prosecutor didn't press. They did do it this time on rebuttal, where anything could have happened with that gun in between. If you're in a car and you're riding, Meg and Kelsey were in the back seat. Tory was in the front passenger seat, and Quan was driving when they left away from this soap opera scene of everything that occurred. He could have wiped the gun down. He could have did anything. So then people were like, well, if you wipe the gun down, it wouldn't be no DNA. No, that's not true. It just compromises it. So you can't pick it up. Or again, he may not have much DNA because he wasn't touching on himself or touching his hair or touching his face when he left the pool. But you know what, Nikki B, do we really believe Kelsey didn't know? Because if they were all over the internet like that, why wouldn't Kelsey know? But the fact they was fighting like that over this little guy, I was like, Lord have mercy. But it sounds like Tory became interested in Kylie because he was all flirting with her, I guess, at the pool. That's supposed to be what the whole agitation from Meg came from. So Tory from the streets. He for the streets. He ain't just he for the streets. He whatever's happening at that time, whatever's going on, that's what he down for. Yes, y'all, please hit the like button. We got 350 of y'all in this good chat. Thank y'all for hanging out with your girl. Hopefully, I explained it. The whole case is complicated. So I wanted to give more of a chronological timeline because everybody's just picking up bits and pieces and posting it. So I just wanted to have the time where I can tell you guys, like, how each testimony went and the order that they went and where we are now. Kelsey knew, and remember, Kelsey said she called the guy she was dealing with after they got back in the car. Oh my, yes. Nobody wants to tell the whole story. Yeah, I agree. I think but see, everybody lawyered up. You know what I'm saying? When Meg talked, she came with her lawyer. I think when Kelsey talked, she came with 2 of her lawyers. Quan just disappeared. We have Justin that allegedly ain't showed up. at all. And yeah, so it's been a lot, y'all. You said, listen, if I invite you over someone's house we just met, especially non-melanated people, I'm coming back to get you. Claiming him didn't fit the narrative. The females fighting wasn't supposed to get out the public. Mr. Keller testimony told it. Yeah, but he did. He just got a little dramatic towards the end. You know how some people just got his stereotypes of black people kind of was bleeding out a little bit. The whole, I thought they were gonna throw her in the river. It was like, what? It's like, oh wow. All right, y'all. Well, I'm gonna get ready for today's court session. So I'm gonna talk to you a little later. I'll be back to let you guys know what happens today. You guys have a great morning, and I hope you have a fabulous rest of the day.